Crooks, the attempted assassin of Donald Trump, was big into like furry online deviant art stuff. We used they, them, trans pronouns. Of course, we also know Tyler Robinson was in this furry gay relationship, trans relationship. And of course, we've had 2 churches shot up by trans shooters in the last year. And so we have this scenario where it's very obvious that there is a pipeline of leftist violence occurring here. To some extent, the Trump administration has acknowledged that. The good news is they just named Antifa a foreign terrorist group, so they can expand the amount of power to go after them, chase down these mechanisms that kind of fund and feed into this. But ultimately, this is a sickness of the soul. Like, it's very clear that these men are being radicalized by online leftist propaganda, and that process is being intentionally funded by, I think, larger forces. But we also have a truly spiritual issue, and the fact that these guys, many people have called them the Tranissaries of kind of the system now. These are the violent assassins, kind of castrated by their trans obsession and then sent out in the world to do violence on behalf of the regime. This kind of really effective process of turning these people into kind of violent agents of the left. Do you see the left ever recognizing the danger of that? And is there any way will simply ending Antifa funding these kind of things, will that ultimately dissuade that? Or is this just the result? Are these the last men that have just gone completely the other direction, where they don't sublimate themselves to the system and they would just rather spin out and just kill everyone who they've been told is to blame for where they are as last men, rather than just kind of fade into the background and get their little pleasures?
In the longhouse cultures of Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islanders, as far as I can tell, and the anthropology is not very good, they all practice headhunting, because in the longhouse cultures where the den mother watches all the young men, some young men go crazy and take the pickled heads of their enemies. And so I see it as a sort of similar phenomena where or in the ancient Cybele cult that worshipped the devouring mother goddess of ancient Middle East and Turkey and whatever, the priests of Cybele would crush their own testicles for the mother goddess. And so I see it as sort of an archetypal similarity, that once you worship the castrating mother goddess, you end up with these weird sort of degenerate satanic priests.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I could definitely see how that would build. Yeah, you kind of have this scenario where the only system that's presented to them is this orientation on the hyper feminine, on the longhouse, and so rather than even exist inside of it, they don't know how to fight back against it, so they just kind of self-immolate as an offering to this goddess. That is an interesting way to look at it, and I think probably has some serious truth in it. Well, one of the things that is, did you have more to say on that one?
There's something I'll throw in there as well, and I was considering bringing this up, but I was waiting till you would. But the modern frame is so broken from historic norms that people don't even know what they're looking at. And I find Christians are basically the only demographic that has their own distinct moral access, that they can morally judge the society. Because Christians are the only people in modern America, by and large, as a demographic, who have some remnants of a pre-modern worldview. And Christianity has its own moral compass and access that exists independent from the society. Because the society's moral access is basically everything's permissible as long as you don't physically hurt someone. And what that leaves out is that we are staggeringly immoral through not doing things. There's the morality of not doing things, and there's the morality of doing things. And we're a society where letting your entire people die is the moral thing to do. And from an earlier moral frame, that's staggeringly immoral. Same thing as selling your soul to the machine, a variety of things. But people can't really see outside of our bubble because they're so taken in by it.
I'm glad you just mentioned that because, of course, a lot of things that people will talk about when it comes to the genius of the American system and those kind of things is that we have negative rights, right? These are things that the government must not do to you, and but positive rights are the problem, right? Duties that the government has, those are issues and things we try to avoid. And in a way, that makes sense. But at the same time, it also, I think, makes people miss what virtue is about. Because as you point out, virtue is about action, not lack of action. Like, yeah, emotional continence and these kind of things are about not spurging out and screaming and, or, doing whatever. But there's also affirmative goods, roles you must fill in order to reach your telos, to achieve virtue in your role. And so when you live in a society where all of the values are about what you shouldn't do and just negation and just that, you have those negative rights, but rarely encodes an affirmative, we need to take this action, this role, this virtue forward, then yeah, you do kind of create this scenario, this particularly liberal scenario, where, yeah, you don't have any kind of transcendent tie to ground you in history and to other people who lived in what would be a more classic virtue ethics type centered society. And so you lose that frame. So there's nothing, which I think is why even in amongst Christianity, and I say this as an evangelical, we are getting a lot more people who are looking for pre-modern Christianity. They're looking for Catholicism, or even more really, I think, Orthodoxy, because of its mysticism. And these are kind of the less they're less touched by modernity in a way, though I would argue Catholicism is currently facing quite an issue with that as well. But we can kind of tell that that's ultimately what people are yearning for, even inside the Protestant world. It's more people looking at like Reformed Protestant Christianity as opposed to kind of like mega church evangelicalism, because no matter what strain you're looking at, they're all kind of trying to find that Christianity that does have that transcendent tie and that historical tie and is not completely corrupted by kind of modernity and its processes.
I think something was really lost in the switch from pre-modern to modern Christianity with trying to make Christianity into a rational ethical code rather than a spiritual path. Because I read this book from this Russian World War I era author, and he said, the thing you have to understand about Christianity is it's actually about God, and it's actually about the spiritual element. And he explained it through that lens, and I thought, wait, that makes sense, and it totally reprograms all of the modernist ideals in the topic between the reason that in the pre-modern world that you could have Christian societies that had relentless class oppression and had colonies and that stuff is they hadn't mentally tried to convert Christianity into a secular moral code. They just saw it as a religion. And the issue that people are sort of mentally wrapping their minds around is modernity actively basically beats people from the cradle onwards to not think in mythic terms. And so you're having people whose neurology wasn't trained for this, trying to grasp for a basic human biological need that's been denied to their entire society. And so they're sort of like grappling around. And so, as an example, I know a lot of people who are into Greek Orthodoxy, who are normal American, they're not ethnically Orthodox people. And it's because Greek Orthodoxy has this sort of thing they're trying to reach to a greater degree than the Western churches. But the Greek Orthodox Church was not the church of St. Augustine, where people would see a relic and then just start spasming with sort of divine ecstasy. That's something you can read about in earlier societies, but is very rare today.
Yeah, no, I like the very specific, that it's about God, not about a moral code. You can really feel Immanuel Kant and his consequences have been a disaster. That the need to try to turn everything into a categorical imperative. There's some objective system where that's what really Christianity is valuable as, is this rational system of ethical codes rather than being a real religion tied to the metaphysical truths. And that is, of course, as you point out, why people are especially looking at Orthodoxy, because it does allow for that mysticism that has been driven out of most Western Christianity.